Hello everybody, how is it going? So today we are taking a look at Red Green Law in the upcoming, well not so much upcoming, but Op05 format. We're still very early on in the format, but yeah, starting off, this is the deck list that I played at locals recently. I was talking about it in the Corazon video, but I figured I'd show this real quick. There are some changes that I'm considering, and we'll go over all that in later in the video. But for now, the deck is honestly, it's pretty cookie cutter. I guess the only new card is the 1-drop Robin. And I guess the only thing that I guess is a bit interesting is I guess the Machinos are probably not super standard. Everything else looks pretty normal, honestly. I don't know if how much I really have to talk about this. I cut down on 2 Veggies. I'm only playing 2. I think that's fine. I think Veggie is like the most cuttable card. I know some people like to consider cutting 1 Restand Law. I don't like doing that. I think the card is just too good, works too well with the deck. And yeah, this is the list I was playing. I don't think it's anything super crazy. I will say the Robin is very nice in the Sakazuki matchup if you can find her at a good time. I'm running 2. You could definitely like cut her to 1 because you're pretty consistent in finding her, as Dadan and Nami both can add her. But I wanted to see her just a little bit more, so I put her at 2. Outside of that, I guess another thing that's a bit different is the 2 Rush Luffy. I just think, at least late game with Sakazuki, a lot of the time he will kind of rely on blockers because he's used a lot of his sand size by then to continually deal with your board. So Luffy just lets you, kind of cheese out those games that they're just relying on surviving because they have blockers on the board. So yeah, card is very solid into the Sakazuki matchup and some other matchups in this format. Just a lot of blockers, a lot of good blockers this format, so Luffy existing is very nice. We have 2 Radical Beam because it's unlimited now, so we stop with the 1 Rad Beam, 1 Guard Point, just 2 Beam. Yeah, Radical Beam is still a crazy card. It's just like, some turns you just live when you really shouldn't. You just have a crazy amount of defense randomly, so yeah, can't say no to that. I'm still playing the starter deck Nami because red purple Luffy still exists and some people are still playing Whitebeard, so just getting that freed on every turn is very solid. Only playing 2 Sanjis. Most decks don't starve you, sometimes NL will, so having the option of Sanji is definitely nice. I'm playing 2 Machino because Machino is another card that just randomly cheeses you games if you're left on the board with just like a Nami or a Robin, and you just swing kind of with your leader and they're like, okay, I can counter out of the next attack from the 1-drop and I win or I live the game, and then you just drop a Machino or 2 and all of a sudden your 1-drop Nami is a very big beater. So I think the card is definitely worth the slot. The rest of it is standard stuff, maxing out on the laws. I'm not playing the starter deck Zoro, and we'll get into that a little bit more. I'm just playing 4 Rush Zoro. There are definitely some replacements, and we'll get into that in just a second. So yeah, let's just hop into that right now. So pulling up just some ideas that you can play for the deck. Starting off is the Jinbei 2K counter from the ST10 starter deck. I think the card is solid. Again, it's another good 2K. If you prefer this 2K over the Brook, you can always play it over the Brook, or you can split them, kind of how I did with like Sanji and the Machino. It's just another utility 2K. I think in this deck it's kind of worse than Otama, because Otama just works so well with your leader ability. So, I mean, it's definitely a consideration if you want to. Obviously, it's searchable off of Nami, just like Brook. But it's an idea. I don't know how much you really need it, but yeah, it's there. Next up is starter deck Zoro. I'm iffy on this card, but I think you do play some amount of this card if you're playing the Film Brook. Just having more targets for the Film Brook. I think I definitely want to try the list with Film Brook and maybe 1 starter deck Zoro, 1 or 2. Probably just 2 Brook is the most I'd play. But the card it's good into Sakazuki, any removal matchup. Having the Film Brook into Zoro is always solid because it's higher cost characters that they can't deal with as easy As say you just had a bunch of 1 or 2 drops, especially against Lucci. They need a couple more cards to actually out that, so that is nice. Finally is X-Drake. The card it's decent. It's good at, like popping Lucci's, like Enel's 4-drop Ohms and stuff like that. Like, it has its spots to come up, but me personally, I don't think I'm going to be playing it just because the card sometimes, it's just hard to find value. Sometimes the card feels crazy, like super good, and then other times it's like, man, this could just be a Law or a Restand Law and it'd be better, so. Yeah, but it is a consideration if you like the card, maybe play one of it, but yeah. I definitely think the Filmbrook and the starter deck Zoro are more real considerations. The Jinbei as well. It is just more utility for your 2K counters, so you can't really complain at that. But yeah, I do think Filmbrook and Zoro are probably a worthy inclusion, so I'll definitely mess around with it a little bit more. This is just a list, again, I was playing for locals, and I know people wanted to see it, so there it is. And finally, let's get into the matchups. I think the matchups are very important. We have some good ones, we have some harder ones, and we have some that I have no idea how it would actually go. But I'll kind of think about how I can theory how these matchups will go. I've played them maybe once or twice, so yeah. Some starting off matchups that I think are good for us is Red Purple Luffy. He's kind of like Whitebeard, but has 3 less cards in life, and I think, again, they don't have the best answers to blockers. Yes, they do have Diablo Jambe to kind of get around that, but as long as you know that card exists, you can usually play around it. Just being able to constantly check them for 6, you have Restand Law, which is very good into the 6K matchups. We just play enough 6K bodies that playing into Whitebeard or Red Purple Law, or sorry, not Red Purple Law, Red Purple Luffy, is like not that hard. It's not that bad, so I'm always kind of on that, I guess, statue. I do think like you're a bit better into Red Purple Luffy than Whitebeard, just because they have less cards to work with, and if you're constantly checking them for 6Ks, it can be very annoying, so there is that. Next up, I think of all the new decks, this is probably Law's best matchup, and that is Purple Luffy. I just think the deck doesn't have enough good answers to what Law wants to do, that it just kind of crumbles. Obviously, you're taking life a lot, and getting checked with multiple 5Ks is very annoying, because you really don't want to take that life. You want to use your leader ability, for that life to ramp it on, so I do think Law does very well. The only kind of equalizer in the matchup is like 9 Kaido, and even then, as long as the Law player can recover, the game is still in Law's favor. Just kind of like the little blockers are hard to deal with for Luffy. The best card he has is probably like Polly into 9-drop, and even then I still think Law does very well into the deck. So there is that. Next up, Red Purple Law, the Law mirror, but not really. I think this deck kind of crumbles a bit to very aggressive decks, and yes, they do have the removal, but they aren't great at removing multiple bodies. So if you're Red-Green Law, you play all your searchers, you play little blockers. Sure, they'll always be able to bottom them, but at that point you just are playing too many bodies that's hard for them to keep up. You're checking them a lot. You can very easily fight for board. You could just choose to not swing at their life and just fight for board the whole game, and you'll probably out-resource them. So there is that. Yeah, I think it's just a good matchup. After that is Queen. Law, I think, has always done pretty well into Queen. If they start starving you out, it's a little bit hard. That's why we play the Sanji. But I still think, if you see Sanji in that matchup and you're able to be as aggressive as you want to be, it should go your way. And finally, Katakuri. Law has always kind of destroyed Katakuri, honestly. They do have some new cards, which could potentially help, like the Enel Sky Island stuff. Let them go a little bit wider with like the Ohm Holy. They have some removal in Kidatsu. They have what's the card called? 2 billion volts to like tap a little blocker and maybe try to either go for game or like beat over your bigger characters. So there is that. They did get tools to help them against Law, but I still think the matchup is Law favored. And moving on to kind of, I'd say, the even matchups, Enel first. I need to play this matchup a bit more, but I do think it can go either way. If you, as Law, obviously you have a little hits. They'll probably take all of them until they get to 1 life, and then you should be able to be aggressive enough to close out the game. But if you get stalled by multiple triggers, and that could happen with an L, it gets very hard. I think if they're playing the star variant, the matchup is probably harder. Again, I still think it's pretty even, but you know, they can pretty much deal with all your aggression and then start like popping your 5-drop laws and stuff with the Yamato if they haven't hit your life at all. Again, that could be worked around with the Sanji, but yeah, I think the matchup is definitely harder than Queen and Katakuri. Yeah. I think Enel just kind of does what Queen wants to do, at least for now, maybe a little bit better. Maybe that's a crazy take, maybe I'm wrong in saying that, but yeah, I just think Enel literally always having the heal is really, really strong. So moving on, we have Zoro. I put this in even because I'm not sure how many Zoro lists are actually playing the 3-cost Fire Fist. I know a lot of them are playing the new Fire Fist and like an amount of like Robins, but if you are playing that matchup and they are not playing the Whitebeard Pirates 3-cost Fire Fist, I just realized the other one is also Whitebeard Pirates, but I think the matchup is pretty even. Again, sometimes buggies are very annoying in the matchup. You know, if they are playing 3-cost Fire Fist, it does get kind of hard. But that's just kind of always how the matchup has been. Law has always been able to win the matchup, but getting like Fire Fisted multiple times in a row is very annoying. And finally, Whitebeard. Again, kind of same spot as Red Purple Luffy. I still think it's pretty even. Law just has the ability to deal with swinging 6 multiple times. We have like the Nami, the starter deck Nami tech choice that lets you kind of swing with leader and still play on curve. So I just think Law has always done fine in that matchup, so nothing really has changed there. And then moving on to the hard matchups, we have Sakazuki first. Obviously, the quote-unquote new best deck. We'll see, how well he does. But yeah, just having to deal with Lucci is very, very annoying. That card is really, really strong against Law. And yeah, again, it might be one of Law's harder matchups, but it is winnable. You kind of have to hope you have a lot of searchers to sustain yourself while you're trying to build your board. It's going to be hard. I'm trying to think of some key things that'll help. I've talked about this in other videos, but if you are going first and they are going second, and your turn 1, let's say you play a 1-drop, their turn 2, they do not play a brand new. This is important. If they play a brand new, this doesn't matter. But if they don't brand new, when it comes back to you, it's probably best to not swing at them, because if you swing at them just a 5k and then play out your other searchers or blockers or whatever, it'll allow them to counter, which will put 2 cards in their graveyard. Obviously, they will cycle turn 1, and then when you pass back to them, they'll be able to cycle again, get 3 in graveyard, or trash, sorry, and then they will be able to Lucci you on curve, which is absolutely devastating in that matchup. So if you can avoid that at any cost, yeah, do that. That is one way to kind of stop it. But outside of that, if they have turn 1 brand new, you're just going to be in for a rough match. Just hope they don't have a bunch of Luccis. That's kind of the best I can tell you. Outside of that, in most control matchups, I try to like keep my board standing mostly, which obviously doesn't always work out, I just like not having to defend my characters and always just try to put them on, okay, have the removal, have the correct answer for this, and you got it, but at least I'm not dropping, cards to defend it. So yeah. And then finally in the minus tier, we have Rebecca. Again, kind of same spot as Sakazuki. She is a bit less aggressive than Sakazuki, which I think is kind of fine for Law. Again, I've showed you can kind of take your time building up your board in that matchup and just pass turns without playing anything and just swing big. And yeah, I think that matchup is easier for Law than Sakazuki. But similar boat, similar cards. You're going to have to still deal with Lucci's and other efficient forms of removal. So yeah, and then finally we have the not sure tier. Starting off Corazon. If he sees Sugar and is able to keep Sugar around, the matchup is probably in his favor. Keep in mind, we are playing the 1-drop Robin, which is a very good answer to the Sugar. And yeah, again, we have Otama to kind of answer 8-drop kid. There are good answers for Law into that matchup, but I haven't played it enough to give you an efficient answer. And next up, Bello Betty. It can, you guys have probably, if you've seen some of my other videos recently, when I was doing the testing series with Law, the matchup can be very scary. Sometimes it makes me feel like you're maybe just supposed to not hit their life, not give them any triggers, and just try to survive, you know, until you clear their board, they're low on cards, and then you can play the game a bit. But yeah, I want to say, I want to put it in even, just because I don't want to say the matchup is bad, you know, off that one game I played. So yeah, I'm gonna say probably even. I don't even think I gave Corazon a rating. I'm gonna say also probably even, if not Law favored, because I do think you have the correct answers to what Corazon wants to do. And finally, or not finally, just next up, Sabo. I haven't even seen a deck list for Sabo that I think would be the standard deck list. I feel like Sabo is such an outlier right now. I think the deck is functional. Like, I don't think it's bad. Like, it can do what it wants to do, but I have no idea how the matchup would be. I would just say it's probably Law favored as a guess. And finally, Green Purple Dofi. These are just kind of the meta decks I thought of, or I put Corazon in here in Sabo. They're just new leaders that I guess you can think about. But finally, Green Purple Dofi. Birdcage is a new card, and it sounds very, very strong against Law, but I'm not sure if it's enough for the matchup to be good for him. Obviously, last set when they were playing Film Doflamingo, I think it was a good matchup for Law. And this set, if they're playing more of the Birdcage, play 7-drop Kid minus a Dawn, keep the Birdcage forever type of build, it could definitely be harder because everything you play is 5 or less. So I'm going to say maybe it's slightly in Doflamingo's favor if they're playing the new build. And yeah, that's kind of all my thoughts I have on Red-Green Law this format. There are more matchups I have to play, but yeah, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one.